I love my husband, but sometimes I just wish he would leave the room for a little while. If you've ever felt the same, this video is for you. As the years go by, something shifts inside many women. The man who once felt like a soulmate can start to feel like a stranger. Not because love disappeared, not because you're asking too much, but because life itself has changed. Expectations have grown, needs have deepened, and disappointments, even the quiet ones, have quietly added up. Welcome to Life in Words. Here we share real stories from real hearts so you can feel seen, understood, and gently healed. If you care about emotional well-being, long-term relationships, and how to live with more joy as you age, make sure you subscribe. We're here every week with stories that matter. And before we begin, let me ask, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or state in the comments. I would love to know who's out there with us. Now let's walk through 8 deeply practical reasons why so many women after 60 begin to feel distant from the very men they once couldn't imagine living without. Reason number 1, when what once felt charming becomes exhausting. When Linda first married Charles, she believed one simple truth: as long as we love each other, we'll always be happy. In those early years, Charles was clumsy but endearing. He often misplaced his wallet. He told the same story twice at family dinners. Sometimes he even spilled his coffee at the breakfast table. But none of that mattered to Linda, because he also never forgot to kiss her goodnight. He always offered her the last piece of dessert, and he made her laugh in ways no one else could. Those little quirks, the ones that once melted her heart, felt like proof of their love. But now in their 60s, they no longer feel the same. The charm has faded. What once made her smile now makes her sigh. Charles hasn't really changed. He is still the same man with the same habits. But Linda has changed. She is not the 30-year-old who found everything amusing. She is a woman who has carried decades of responsibility. She has raised children. She has managed bills. She has juggled sleepless nights caring for elderly parents. And she has quietly given pieces of herself away in the process. Now she doesn't only want affection. She longs for partnership. Not just "I love you," but "I hear you. I see you. I will share the load with you." So when Charles leaves the lights on again or asks her to repeat something she already explained, Linda doesn't just feel annoyed, she feels unseen. And then comes the guilt. How can she be irritated with the man she promised to grow old with? The answer's simple. She has changed because life has changed. Marriage at this stage is no longer about romantic dinners or roses on the table. It's about finding a teammate, someone to walk beside you when days feel heavy. And when one partner stays the same, while the other grows, distance quietly builds. The love may still be there, but love without growth feels stuck. What was once charming now feels careless, and repetition can make everything feel old, predictable, and tiring. If you've ever sighed at something your husband still does the exact same way, after all these years, type the number 1 in the comments. You'll see you're not alone. Because this is only the beginning. The first small cracks often start with habits. But what truly wears down the bond is something even heavier. It's the unseen weight carried every single day. Let's continue. Reason number 2, the quiet weight no one talks about. Patricia is always the first to wake in her home. She prepares breakfast before the sun rises. She washes the dishes, wipes the counters, and starts a load of laundry. She reminds her husband Edward to take his morning pills. She calls her daughter to check on the grandchildren. And she makes a mental note today she must pay the electric bill. All of this happens quietly, automatically, almost invisibly. Meanwhile, Edward sits at the table with his coffee and newspaper. He casually asks Patricia, "Have you seen my brown sweater?" Patricia doesn't respond out loud. Inside, she sighs. Doesn't he see I'm spinning in circles every single day? This scene isn't rare. Across countless homes, women in their 60s carry the daily weight of responsibility. From caregiving to cooking, remembering appointments, managing diets, keeping track of bills. It's a full-time job without pay, without breaks, and often without recognition. One evening, Patricia tried to voice her feelings. "I feel like I'm doing everything on my own," she whispered. Edward chuckled softly. "You've always been so organized. I'm not good at that sort of thing." The words were not meant to hurt, but they cut deep. Because when responsibilities are not shared, a woman doesn't just feel tired, she feels invisible. Not a partner, but a housekeeper. Not a teammate, but a caretaker. And this invisible weight builds little by little. At first it looks like silence. Later it feels like loneliness, even when someone is sitting right beside her. Eventually Patricia begins to speak less. Not because she has nothing to say, but because she believes it won't matter. This imbalance doesn't always show up as arguments or shouting. It shows up in who remembers the insurance payment, who schedules the doctor appointments, who notices when groceries are running out, who quietly takes care of everyone without being asked how she herself is doing. When no one notices, a woman begins to lose herself in the very home she built. Her role turns into a constant cycle of giving without receiving, and the distance grows. If you've ever felt lonely in your marriage, even with someone sitting at the same table, type the number 2 in the comments. Your voice matters. Because the cracks in a relationship don't always begin with anger. Sometimes they begin in silence, and silence left too long can erase closeness faster than words ever could. But it's not only about chores. The weight becomes heavier when the body itself begins to change. Let's move deeper into that next. Reason number 3, when the body changes, emotions change too. Helen used to love the quiet evenings with Robert. They would sit together on the couch watching an old movie. His hand would rest on hers, warm and steady. Sometimes he would lean in with a gentle kiss. Those little touches made her feel safe, wanted, and deeply loved. But in recent years, something shifted. The warmth she once welcomed now feels different. His touch sometimes makes her stiffen. The closeness that used to comfort her now brings unease. Robert noticed it too, but instead of asking, he quietly pulled away, and little by little silence grew between them. After the age of 55, a woman's body changes in ways that can feel unfamiliar. Menopause brings hot flashes, dryness, and aching joints. Sleepless nights drain her energy. Hormonal shifts affect mood, desire, and patience. These changes are not just physical. They touch every part of a woman's emotional life. One evening, Helen tried to explain, "My body feels different. I don't always know what to do with it, and it scares me." Robert looked puzzled. "I thought you just didn't want me anymore." Instead of bringing them closer, the conversation left them both silent. What neither of them realized was that love was still there. Helen still wanted closeness. She still longed for affection, but she needed it in a gentler, slower, more thoughtful way. Not passion in the same form as before, but tenderness, patience, and understanding. When those needs are not acknowledged, emotional distance widens, physical silence becomes emotional silence, and the bond that once felt unshakable begins to fade. A compliment, a kind glance, a soft hand held without expectation. These small gestures could mean everything to Helen now. But because she feels embarrassed or unsure how to ask, she stays quiet. And Robert, unsure what she really needs, stays distant. This is how many couples drift apart. Not with anger, but with absence. Not with shouting, but with silence. If you've ever felt distant from your partner, not because you stopped loving him, but because your body and spirit needed something different, type the number 3 in the comments. You may be surprised how many women quietly feel the same. Because sometimes what a woman needs most is not to be touched, but to be understood. And when that understanding is missing, love slowly retreats. But distance in marriage doesn't only appear in the bedroom. It can also be found in conversations or in the lack of them. And that silence can be just as heavy as any physical change. Let's continue. Reason number 4, what's not said is what breaks us. One morning, Grace was standing at the sink washing dishes after breakfast. Her husband, William, sat in the living room reading his newspaper as usual. Grace called out gently, "Could you help me clear the table?" Without even looking up, William replied, "I'll do it later." But later never came. No shouting, no arguments, just words ignored and needs brushed aside. And in that small moment, a tiny crack opened in Grace's heart. Marriage doesn't usually collapse because of big fights. More often, it breaks in silence. It breaks in small moments when one partner feels invisible, unheard, or dismissed. When a woman speaks and no one truly listens, she slowly begins to stop speaking. Not because she has nothing to say, but because she feels it no longer matters. One afternoon, Grace asked, "If I don't remind you, will you remember your mother's doctor appointment today?" William shrugged. "You're better at remembering that kind of stuff." He didn't mean harm, but his words left her feeling alone, carrying the weight of the household, the schedules, and the memories all by herself. It's not always the loud conflicts that damage love. It's the quiet erosion, the daily dismissals, the weight of always having to remind, to plan, to organize. When a partner stops listening, it is as if a wall rises between two people who once shared everything. Grace began to wonder, why speak if no one is truly listening? Why share if her words only dissolve into silence? Over time, she felt herself withdraw. She laughed less. She confided less. She stopped hoping for change. This kind of emotional withdrawal is more dangerous than arguments because it replaces connection with distance. It replaces warmth with emptiness. If you've ever spoken and felt like your words were ignored or brushed aside, type the number 4 in the comments. Even one voice saying "I've been there" can bring comfort to someone who feels the same loneliness. Sometimes saving a marriage doesn't start with grand gestures. It doesn't require a big trip or a new promise. It starts with something much simpler. I hear you. I see you. I'm paying attention. But as women grow older, they begin asking deeper questions, questions that go beyond chores or silence, questions that ask, am I truly happy in this life I've built? And those reflections can change everything. In the next part, we'll see what happens when a woman begins to rediscover herself, only to realize she may not see her husband walking beside her anymore. Reason number 5, when a woman rediscovers herself but no longer sees her husband beside her. After the children left home, Diana noticed a stillness she hadn't felt in decades. The house that once echoed with laughter, school schedules, and endless tasks now felt strangely quiet. For the first time in years, Diana had time for herself. She began picking up books she had abandoned long ago. She signed up for a watercolor class at the community center. She even started practicing yoga, something she once thought was too indulgent. Slowly, she felt pieces of herself returning, the parts that were once buried under the roles of mother, wife, and caretaker. It was both liberating and unsettling, because while she rediscovered her own passions, she realized Joseph, her husband of more than 30 years, wasn't on the same path. He was still rooted in the old routines, watching television, reading the news, following the same rhythm every day. And for the first time, Diana asked herself a painful question. Do we still have anything in common? Does he even know who I am now? She loved Joseph, but love alone no longer felt enough. She wanted a partner who could share this new chapter, who could walk beside her as she explored life with fresh eyes. Instead, she felt like they were standing on opposite sides of the same house, living parallel lives but rarely meeting in the middle. Many women at this stage don't leave their marriages because they stop loving their husbands. They drift away because they no longer recognize themselves within the relationship. The person they are becoming doesn't fit with the role they've been playing for decades. For Diana, it wasn't about abandonment. It was about loneliness. Loneliness that can still exist even with someone sitting at the same dinner table. She wasn't asking for perfection. She was asking for recognition. For Joseph to notice her growth, to join her in becoming, not just in staying the same. This is the silent turning point for many women. When self-discovery collides with marital stagnation, the distance widens. And without effort from both sides, that distance can become permanent. If you've ever felt yourself growing in a new direction while your partner stayed in place, type the number 5 in the comments. Your story could bring comfort to someone quietly feeling the same. Because marriage isn't only about holding on to the past, it's about evolving together. And when one person grows while the other remains still, love risks losing its rhythm. But emotional distance isn't always about growth. Sometimes it's about something even simpler, something as small and as powerful as a loving glance that suddenly disappears. Let's keep going. Reason number 6, when loving glances disappear. One autumn morning, Mary looked into the bathroom mirror. At 68, she saw fine lines around her eyes and silver threads woven through her hair. She didn't resent the changes. She accepted them with quiet grace. What hurt was not the reflection staring back at her. It was the absence of something she once counted on every single day. Anthony, her husband, no longer looked at her the way he used to. No more quick compliments when she walked into the room. No more playful stares across the dinner table. No spark of recognition that said, "I see you." Instead, there was only familiarity, a quiet routine, a silence that stung more than words ever could. For a woman who once felt like the center of her husband's world, that silence felt like heartbreak. Because love isn't just about romance. It isn't only about the big gestures. It's about feeling seen, noticed, desired, cherished. Mary didn't need to be 30 again. She didn't want expensive gifts or dramatic declarations. What she longed for was so much simpler. A smile when she entered the room, a hand that lingered on hers while watching television, a kind word that reminded her she was still beautiful in his eyes. But when those gestures faded, she began to wonder, am I invisible now? Am I still loved or just too familiar to notice? Aging changes all of us, but it should never erase the need to feel valued. When affection disappears, a woman doesn't just feel older, she feels unseen, and that quiet ache can make her withdraw. Anthony wasn't unkind. He wasn't cruel. He simply stopped noticing. But for Mary, that silence spoke louder than any argument ever could. It said, "You don't matter the way you once did." Affection lives in small daily acts, a warm glance, a thoughtful compliment, a gentle touch. These little sparks can reignite warmth that time tries to dim, and when they vanish, so too does a part of intimacy. If you've ever wished for your partner to notice you again, to look at you not out of habit but with true affection, type the number 6 in the comments. Your honesty could remind someone else that they are not invisible. Because love doesn't fade overnight. It fades when attention disappears, when kindness is replaced by silence, and when presence turns into absence. But affection isn't the only thing many couples lose with time. There is another storm that quietly builds in later years, a weight that doesn't just strain the heart, but also the bond. Let's talk about that next. Reason number 7, when financial pressure slowly wears down the bond. Laura used to be the light of her home. She filled weekends with laughter, planned small getaways, and always had ideas for family traditions. But at 65, something heavier settled on her shoulders. It wasn't just age, it was worry. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter. The cost of her medication rose every year. Her aging mother needed care that was both expensive and exhausting. And the thought of retirement, once exciting, now felt frightening. Laura remembered when she and David used to dream together. Over coffee, they would imagine a little cabin by the lake. They would talk about trips they might take once the children were grown. Those dreams once gave them hope. But now money was no longer a topic of joy. It had become a source of silence. Whenever Laura tried to bring it up, David would wave his hand and say, "Things will work themselves out." But for her, they weren't working out. They were getting heavier by the day. And what hurt most wasn't just the financial strain, it was the loneliness of carrying that burden alone. Marriage is supposed to be a partnership, not only in good times, but in the hard ones. When one person carries all the weight, even love begins to feel fragile. Laura didn't expect David to solve everything. She just wanted him to sit with her, to look her in the eyes and say, "We'll face this together." But instead, she felt like she was fighting for their future by herself. The silence built walls where teamwork used to be, and slowly her hope began to fade. Financial pressure doesn't just strain the bank account, it strains the bond. It turns dreams into worries. It turns shared laughter into quiet distance. And it leaves a woman feeling that even in marriage, she is alone. If you've ever felt like the only one worrying about the financial future of your family, type the number 7 in the comments. Your small gesture could help someone else feel less invisible. Because love isn't only about joy, it's about sharing burdens, real burdens like money, aging, and fear. Without that, even the strongest marriages begin to crack. And beyond money, beyond the routines, there is something even more essential. Something every woman longs for in the later chapters of life: respect. Because when respect fades, love soon follows. Let's move into the final part. Reason number 8, when love fades without respect. Evelyn was 66 when she realized something painful. She no longer needed flowers on her birthday. She no longer longed for candlelit dinners or grand surprises. What she needed most was something simpler yet deeper: respect. She had raised children. She had worked tirelessly to keep her family strong. She had cared for her aging parents, often putting her own needs last. Through it all, she gave more of herself than she ever thought possible. And now in this season of life, she finally knew what mattered most in marriage: to be heard, to be recognized, to be treated as an equal partner. Patrick, her husband, still loved her, but he loved her in the same old way, as if nothing had changed since the early years. When she shared her worries, he would shrug. When she voiced her needs, he would smile gently and say, "You worry too much." He thought he was comforting her, but to Evelyn it felt like dismissal, like her thoughts carried no weight. It wasn't anger that grew inside her. It was invisibility. She felt like a shadow in her own home, always present, always giving, yet rarely acknowledged. She managed meals, kept track of appointments, organized family events. But thanks were scarce, recognition almost non-existent. Without respect, love becomes brittle. It loses its warmth. It begins to fade, not with a sudden break, but with quiet erosion. Patrick didn't mean to hurt Evelyn. He simply didn't see that the woman standing before him was not the same girl from decades ago. She had changed, she had grown, and now she needed to be valued as a partner, not just as a helper. Respect is not about grand gestures. It's about the daily act of saying, "You matter. Your voice matters. I am grateful for you." Without it, even love itself loses its strength. If you've ever felt like the only one carrying the emotional weight in your marriage, type the number 8 in the comments. You're not asking for too much. You're asking for fairness, and every woman deserves that. Because true love isn't just affection, it's balance, it's acknowledgement. It's choosing every single day to honor the person who has walked beside you through life's storms. All 8 of these reasons are not meant to place blame. They are meant to open our eyes, to remind us what matters most as we grow older. And now let's take a final moment to reflect. Because while love may change shape, it never has to disappear. Love doesn't vanish with age. It changes shape. It softens, it deepens, and sometimes it grows quieter. But if we stop noticing, what remains after decades together may be distance and silence. We've walked through 8 very real reasons why many women begin to feel disconnected: habits that no longer charm, invisible responsibilities, physical changes, words left unspoken, rediscovering oneself, fading affection, financial strain, and the absence of respect. None of these begin with drama. They begin quietly in the things left unsaid, in the gestures forgotten, in the weight carried alone. But here's the truth. If we understand the why, we can still change the how. Marriage at any age can be renewed. If both people are willing, if both are brave enough to listen, to grow, and to walk side by side again. You don't need perfection. You need presence. You need a partner who chooses every single day to see you, to hear you, and to honor you. That is what keeps love alive. If you've ever felt distant in your relationship, please don't hold it all inside. Type the number 9 in the comments or share a small part of your story. Your words might be exactly what another woman needs to hear today. And if this video touched you, I invite you to subscribe to Life in Words. Each week we share stories to help you live deeper, feel stronger, and age with grace, purpose, and connection. Thank you for listening. And remember, happiness isn't found in perfection. It's found in 2 people who keep choosing each other day after day.